Hello and welcome to the Crash and Ride podcast, a podcast about anxiety and depression and surviving that when you're a musician or artist or other creative person. My name is Patrick Ferguson. I'll be your host. I've been a drummer and audio engineer for 25 or 30 years. I've survived my own battles with anxiety and depression. But I'm not someone who spends a lot of time in front of a microphone myself, so if I'm awkward or weird, I'm going to apologize for that now. Today's episode is an interview with Jake Cregger, a musician who I've admired for many years. He's the drummer for the band Multicult, also the bands Ar-Kaics and Triac. He's just a fantastic drummer and a really great guy, and it was in a recent conversation with him that he revealed to me that he'd had his own struggles with anxiety and depression. We had a really great conversation. It actually ended up going a lot longer than I expected, so I hope that it's something that might be useful to anyone out there who's still struggling with these sorts of things. The purpose of this podcast is to create a dialogue about depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, intrusive thoughts, obsessive behaviors, things that many of us have experienced both as sort of part of our job as being musicians or artists or just part of being a human being. If you have questions or comments or there's something you want us to discuss, send us an email at crashandride@protonmail.com. That's crashandride@protonmail.com. I'm the only one who checks that mailbox, and I'm going to protect your anonymity at all costs. It's encrypted, and no one has the password but me, so I'm not going to violate your anonymity or blow your information out on the internet. Before we get into the interview with Jake, I want to talk a little bit about some shows I have upcoming. I am a drummer, as I mentioned before. I play with the amazing Japanese rock band Pinky Doodle Poodle. I also play with the rock band 5/8. Pinky Doodle Poodle has some shows coming up. By the time you hear this, you may miss the first one, which is March 2nd in Charleston, South Carolina at the Tin Roof. We're playing Monday, March 4th at Smith's Old Bar. And we're playing at the Chicken Ranch Day Party at South by Southwest at the Hole in the Wall. That'll be during the day. 5/8 is also playing March 13th at the Chicken Ranch Day Party at Hole in the Wall. Also March 14th at the Chicken Ranch Showcase at Valhalla. 5/8 is also playing the Athens and Austin Georgia Theater Showcase at Antone's on March 16th. And we're playing the next day at the Austin Chili Dog Fest, which should be a lot of fun. Anyway, that's all the shows I have coming up. Let's jump into our interview with Jake Cregger. We're here with Jake Cregger, drummer for one of my favorite bands, Multicult, but also the band Ar-Kaics and the band Triac, which I have not been fortunate enough to see. Tell me about Triac, Jake.
Triac is a band I've been doing forever. I think at this point somebody added it up at a show a little bit ago. I think like maybe 15 years. It's just a grind band that I grew up playing a bunch of grind stuff, and that's been kind of the main, kind of like the longest lasting band I've been doing. And there's been a bunch of lineup changes and stuff, but it's just always remained fun despite how long it's been going on. And it's just a total delight to play with the people I play with, and it's just an excuse for me to get up and play as fast as possible and get some adrenaline pumping.
I'd be remiss at this point if I didn't mention that if you haven't seen Jake play, I've seen him several times with Multicult, and he is one of the brain-wormiest drummers I've ever seen. Jake's parts get in my head, and I go back to my drum kit, and I'm like, how did he do that? Why can't I do that? Multicult tours a lot, so I've been fortunate to see them, but the Arkaics are playing a lot now, and that's a garage punk thing. Is that right?
Yeah, that's just really straightforward, but just kind of off in a unique way. It's just garagey stuff. It's fun. I can't really claim any credit to its creation or content because I just joined it. They had a record just come out on Wick Records, which is part of, I guess, Daptone. So they got to record up there and everything, and they're sort of plugged into that whole machine. And I think they've been doing a lot of the soul stuff. Wick is now an outlet for a lot of garagey stuff, and so this is one of the bands that's on there, and they put out a lot of cool stuff. And I think Ar-Kaics, in my humble opinion, is great. They asked me to do it, and I wasn't immediately kind of sold on doing it. And then they sent me the new record that they had just done, and it was so good that like I had no choice. It was just one of those things. I was like, all right, I have to do this. I've never played music exactly like this.
There's a
Drum
bunch of
wise.
that. Yeah,
Oh,
there's
go
a
ahead.
bunch of that. There's a bunch of that daptone stuff I really like. Um,
And it
that and
sounds so good. They just do
yeah,
such a good job of just, it's, I don't know, it's just a total indulgence for me on a bunch of different levels. And the Ar-Kaics thing was a really cool way for me to kind of just play a whole different style of music that really, in the grand scheme of things, is not so horribly complex, but it's more an interesting, for me, like exercise in restraint. I think so much of what I do is deliberately like, all right, I'm just going to try to just throw everything I have at the kit. And then this is a great way to be like, all right, I'm just going to like deliver exactly what's needed, speak simply and walk away as kind of as soon as possible.
yeah.
Which
So
is a lot of
I
fun. That's really rewarding.
yeah, I feel like there's a whole scene around daptone I need to dig into. There's like the Budos band, and I don't know if they're actually on daptone or just in that scene, and
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
a bunch of other bands that are this kind of wild 60s 70s funk soul thing that I think a whole bunch of those people are all on the like Broadway show Fella, or
Mm-hmm.
were somehow involved in that band. But anyway, um, well, thanks for coming on the podcast. Let's get down to it. As I as you know, and as people who've heard the show description know, that this is really a show about kind of defusing that bomb of depression and anxiety that a lot of us carry around, especially those of us who are musicians or artists of other kinds. So I want to get into that. But first, let's talk a little bit about your early life. Like, where did you grow up and what was your family life like?
Yeah, it's nothing really that remarkable. I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, where I am sitting right now, which I was really fortunate to land in. Um, just in that, it's safe. It's, connected to a lot of stuff on the East Coast, immediately connected to DC. I have three brothers. So I'm the third out of four. My parents, I'd say middle class, upper middle class. Yeah, upper middle class is fair. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's. I mean, are we talking just like general footprint? Or are we talking now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was just sort of curious about like, your early life and I'm going to get into some questions about that in a second, but I am sort of curious if you sort of grew up taking the train into DC to see Discord bands and that kind of thing.
No, I mean age wise, I was born in '83. I ended up, taking training to DC to see a bunch of shows and stuff. But I
Right.
wasn't hell bent on the Discord thing. But
That's
you just.
just it's near and dear to my heart. That's why I asked. I grew up listening to Minor Threat and then Fugazi and
Oh yeah, I'm
yeah.
like a mile from the Discord house right now, but it's yeah, I think in DC that's something that's almost so present that a lot of times you even lose sight of it. Uh but for in a lot of, I mean, I think on a bunch of fronts, um it's like odd if it's not near and dear to your heart. But I think for me the DC, the way DC really impacted me in the Northern Virginia area and Baltimore is just there was a lot of stuff happening that was just immediately accessible, and you could kind of jump into different pools of music, and see stuff that was 10 minutes from your house, but that would completely sort of change your take on things in general.
Yeah.
And so in that, but I think at the same time it's the same experience that a lot of people have in any town, is just you end up seeing that there's these other people similar age, that are creative and doing what they want to do, and that just plugs you into kind of a social network. It gives you it gives you a place socially. It gives you a world to discover and offer something, and that was really important, growing up. And I think it's something that I've done ever since then. But for me, I mean, I think what was cool about that is I got into drums at like a really early age, and I
Hmm.
think by eight, oh, this is a funny little Discord connection. So I think by age, I think in like fourth grade, I had started this band with two guys I knew, and we, like raked leaves and shoveled snow and all this stuff, and ended up just recording our very first like recording ever. We had done
But
some four
wait,
tracks. Go
you were
ahead.
in a band in fourth grade?
Yeah, believe it or not.
What was that band called?
That band was called Evan Sees Red. And it sounded I don't know, like Sebado or really bad Smashing Pumpkins or something.
So you recorded at a studio, or did you have
Recorded
like a
at Inner Ear
four-track?
Studios, which is where all the minor
What?
like
You're
yeah.
with
Which, but dude, keep in mind here, that's just like the local studio.
right.
Uh,
Okay.
so, but isn't that which is really funny? And
So wait, you're in fourth grade. Were the other guys in fourth grade?
technically, I think by the time we recorded it was fifth grade. But
Oh, okay. So you're old men by then.
yeah, well, we're just had to
Seasoned
brush the
veterans.
cobwebs off and get back in there. But
Right.
but so for me, at an early age, it had just become this thing to do. It was just that was like a social world. That's and now at this point, like having that be my kind of most fulfilling outlet, there's just been all these, like, all the important relationships in my life, I think probably could be traced back to some kind of musical connection. So
Right.
um so DC
Hmm.
was just a great fertile place for that.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess if your fifth grade band goes to record at Inner Ear, then yeah, it's different from like where we went when I was in my first recording experience, which was,
Yeah,
you know,
and that's
in a
why I
country
said
and western studio in Tucker, Georgia, with a guy who
yeah.
thought reverb was the best thing that could happen to a snare drum after duct tape.
Duct tape's not so bad, but that's why I
Yeah.
said at the very beginning, I was like really fortunate, and not for that exact reason, but just for a bunch of reasons. Really fortunate to have been born in Arlington. I think that's just
Right.
a huge privilege that was
My
passed
my
to me.
dad my dad lives in Alexandria, so
Yeah,
he talks about how um, going to Walmart there is like going to the UN. Like there's people from every possible corner of the world just shopping at Walmart, and you hear
yeah,
Swahili and you hear Hindi and you hear um, Spanish, and just like it's this sort of panoply of cultures, and he really values that a lot. When we go to Walmart here, it's very different.
yeah. Can you articulate the difference? I'm kidding, but
Well, a
it's
friend
just
of mine has a rule about he doesn't you can't leave Walmart until you hear someone say the word grandbabies.
that's awesome.
And once you hear
Uh,
that, it's okay to leave. Let's
yeah,
let's talk. So like you and I have discussed in other formats, this wrestle with sadness and depression and darkness that you had. When was the first sort of awareness, or when did you first sort of kind of get tackled by that beast?
I think oddly pretty early on, I just didn't realize it. Um,
Uh huh.
but one thing I also think just to flag before diving into a bunch of this stuff,
Hmm.
um, is that I think any dialogue about this can very easily spin into people. um I think I made up this term, but like scar comparison, where it's like, oh well, I was doing this and it was really bad, or like for me, I was depressed in this way and it was really bad. I just want to be very clear that like anything I'm about to say is just my experience. It's not better or worse than anybody else's, but
Right.
that's like all I can speak to. And I want to make, like, for anybody that's listening, being like, oh well, I had it way worse. That's fine. um
Right. I
but
think
just
the I think the important thing though is that for people who are still sort of down in it to know that other people have had this experience and wrestled with these feelings, but and survived it and gone on to be okay.
Yeah,
So
and
I,
that's like, because I really don't. It's funny, when you initially brought this up, I was like, man, I haven't. That's a whole nother life. Like, I haven't thought about it in so long, and then I realized that now, and this is a whole nother thing we could talk about, the way in which it sort of built a very like still existing architecture in how I think, that impacts my life daily. So even though I hadn't thought about it, I'm still connected to it in a really odd way. But or not odd, and it makes sense. But all that being said, just it's interesting for me to jump back in and talk about this stuff, and hopefully something will resonate with somebody on some level. But
yeah.
all that being said, I think early on my situation was that I was just, it was just very clearly just chemically depressed.
Right.
And I'm talking, maybe like, I don't really I go by grade for some reason. So I think in say first grade, I was just a miserable kid and didn't know it. And I think I knew I was a very people-pleasing kid, and so I knew exactly how to kind of deliver whatever was needed to keep everything moving forward socially, whether it's in my family or at school. But on the inside, it was just I was just horribly, just horribly depressed and sad. And I think it just became something that I just assumed everybody else felt like this, and it was just a sort of a gray monotone life. And I think it was very clear that to me there was no reason to think that anybody else had any different that this experience was any different for anybody else.
Uh-huh.
And I think eventually it became I think there was just different factors in my life, and I just became kind of more and more miserable as I got older. And then I think that's when, and older, I'm talking like, stack on a few years. And I think that's when kind of, however old you are, when you start to understand death, became a very, for some odd reason, just a very kind of interesting and oddly kind of comforting and beautiful mental exercise of just
One day this will
ruminating.
all end.
Yeah, in some odd way, yeah, and in some, I only understood it in a minimal sense, but it was, but that sort of planted this weird seed, and then as I got older and got more and more, as kind of the way I look at it, I don't even know if this is helpful, but the divide between being a people pleaser and keeping things socially presentable, and then that became so much more and more removed from how I actually felt.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you're, get to be horribly depressed, you just want to, for me, a lot of people get like really sort of horribly depressed. I get tired. It's just like sleep is the only thing that, that's sort of how that communicated it or was expressed in me. So,
right.
Yeah. And so I just started.
So how old are we talking here?
Like, I don't know, around, how old are you when you're in like 5th or 6th grade?
10.
10, yeah. So around there.
So Evan sees red.
Evan sees red is playing, and that's
Right.
a hugely exciting experience. And then when I'm away from that, it's just like, oh, well, it's just gray and monotone.
I think, I've had a lot of discussions with people about why so many performers struggle with mental health issues, with depression and anxiety. And I wonder if it's a chicken and egg argument. Like, I do know that my earliest periods of happiness were that sort of dopamine rush of playing drums with other people.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is to bring that detail in. It's really hard for me to oddly articulate how I felt at that time, because I didn't know that it was weird. I didn't know that it was off until I started playing drums. And I credit drums for really being the point at which they were a part of my life, was really when I came online as a human being. I feel like everything else was really just kind of a dull march of time. Whereas with drums, it was the first time when it was really when things came into view, and really I could see with contrast, and I could see color, and it was through the drums that I could feel a rush of anything.
It's funny that you would say that, because I always think of drums as like of being the time marker. Like you said, before drums, life was a gray march of time, but then after drums, you're actually marking time. But everything, like in Wizard of Oz, where everything goes to color for the first time.
And oddly enough, maybe that's why I have a terrible rushing problem. I probably had really good time when when I was really bummed out. Now my time's all messed up. But I think for me, and I think we talked about this briefly, is that a way for me to realize how out of touch I was with myself and with the rest of the world is looking back on certain periods of time once drums had popped in, because that added contrast to what was there prior.
Mm-hmm.
What we had talked about was the record Abbey Road, which for me was it's a good record, Beatles, whatever. If you don't like the Beatles, that's not the point. It's that
Hmm.
was the first record that for me, the first record I ever got deliberately. Um, and it was the first time I was really focused on the drums, and it was really kind of like the point of the wedge that really began to open up my head. And I remember listening to that record and really dissecting and kind of tasting and exploring every millisecond of that record, because it was like I could officially see, I could officially taste, and I could officially hear, and I couldn't prior. And it was through that record that I think and through the drums and listening to the drums on that record, which is a really, again, really fortunate record and point in time for me to start to focus on drums. But that really, listening back to that record now and realizing how much of a powerful experience it was to get that record and how powerful those songs were to me as a kid, highlighted is almost the best way for me to highlight what was happening in my life prior to that, which was just kind of like a empty howling space. Um,
Right. Desolate.
and
And
totally.
then,
And
right.
that's why
Do
when
you
you're
think
like, what
this?
was it like? I'm like, I don't know. It was just great. But because
Yeah.
that's really, there's just nothing going on other than me being like, well, like, um, there's nothing that brings me joy. People will be like, oh, like, was this really fun? I'm like, I don't know. I just did it. I went on a
Right.
family vacation. It's like, well, who cares? Because it was just miserable. But the weird part was I could socially deliver, but there was nothing being felt. And I think once the drums came in, it was like I had access to uh, kind of seeing, for example, because I didn't have access to a lot of how I was feeling prior to that point, I didn't know how to communicate it. So, the fragility of emotion or the complexity of aggression or anything like that was almost totally lost to me, but I could see it being communicated in in the Beatles, in these other art forms. And I think that just became such an addictive thing for me. And that's why drums took such a powerful position in my life. That was my connection to just genuinely experiencing the world and
Yeah.
experiencing then myself.
How old were you when you got that record?
Second grade, third grade.
Oh, wow. So that's really early.
Yeah, so I vividly remember it because it was really exciting. So my dad had bought a CD player, which was a really big deal
Right.
because CDs had just come out,
I
and so
remember.
we
Yeah.
went to Circuit City. I don't know if those exist anymore,
I
and
don't either.
I hope not. And I just like I think it was literally random. It was like, oh, Beatles, I've heard of that, but this is my chance to just get something. And so I remember looking at all the Beatles covers, and I thought Abbey Road looked cool, um, and brought it home, and then a switch was flipped. I think it was right as I had just become interested in drums, and this was my chance to kind of experience drums. And even
So,
drums, it's an arbitrary decision. My mom, I remember sitting in my house, and my brother played piano. Like,
mhm.
oh, what are you gonna play? Like, you should play something. And I was like, I don't know, drums. Um, but I think I, like smacked around on stuff with like pencils and that kind of thing. But then that just kind of random decision really brought drums into focus, and then that's how that's what happened when I got that CD, and then the rest just is my life. But again, that was really kind of the vortex from which everything else spilled forth.
Now, did you have a particular attachment to the lyrics of Abbey Road, or was
No,
it just
that's
musical?
totally over my head. And it was literally just a musical communication. The lyrics could have been a harmonica for all I cared. Um, so it was the melodies, and it was the rhythmic statements and all that stuff that just completely sucked me in. Um, and I mean, honestly, right now, having listened to that record a million times back then, I would it would be really difficult for me to just bring a bunch of lyrics to the front, to tell you what the lyrics were, as odd as that is.
Well, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, the sort of Beatles mythos about using the studio as an instrument really is about sort of bringing the colors to the instruments in a way that was more intimate than just pointing a one microphone at an entire band. So, no, I
And that
get
was the
that.
magic of that record, totally. Like the floor tom on Come Together, like that, I still remember that might have been, should have been, for me, it was like, a constellation in the night sky. Like it was that big of a deal because you could just hear, you could taste the drum. Like it was so intimate. And that, and then everything else with that record just pulled me right in. To this point, to this day, it's almost weird to listen to. I listened to it recently, and it's difficult because it's painful, because it reminds me, it highlights how painful things were prior to that. It reminds
Yes,
me of the degree to which I clung to it because I just was so unhappy with everything else. But again, didn't even realize it. It
right.
just
You just thought it was normal.
highlights it. Yeah,
You're living this duality of this disconnected, um, depressed, probably like flat affect kid, and
totally.
then suddenly this like love bomb drops into your life
Yeah,
of the Beatles
that's
record.
a great way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that's really. I, I, I like my turning point record was the Dead Kennedy, so it was a whole different like set of impressions and circumstances. So you start your first band in fourth grade, you make your first record in fifth grade, um, you get the Beatles record in second grade. Like how sort of far into adolescence were you still sort of wrestling with this sadness and anxiety and
Oh man, the
the
adolescence.
whole time?
Oh, I think for me, this was all a really big issue, and then it got worse. So for me, it really began. Oddly enough, this whole time everything was kind of stable. I could still walk around and kind of deliver what I needed to deliver to the rest of the world. Eventually, that became more and more difficult. And then eventually, as far as, for the longest time, just like ruminating about death just became the only thing that was comforting. And then it was the only thing that seemed interesting. And then eventually it became kind of like, oh, well, not like, oh, this is comfortable. It's like, all right, well, maybe this is a decent idea. And then it was like, all right, well, this is a really good idea. Um, Maybe it's kind of like, what are reasons not to do it? And then, by this point, I'm jumping sort of through the years, and it's kind of like just everything kind of slowly melting away inside my head to where it's like, yeah, this is it. This is a wonderful thing. Um, there's a couple roadblocks in the way that I just have to sort out. And by this point, I'm like,
How old?
16,
Okay.
17. I'm really, as you can tell, really bad with years.
It's interesting
But
for a guy who keeps such meticulous time. Your relationship to actual chronology
the
is
actual time
is
is way
really
off.
abstract. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Uh,
you're 16 and you're contemplating suicide, and you're sort of trying to figure out your way around these, as you call them, roadblocks that are
yeah.
keeping you
Well,
from
to
killing
back
yourself.
up a little bit, it's
Okay.
and it didn't end there. I mean, I think what's interesting, what really had happened from a very early age was this ruminations about death as a comforting thing. I didn't have any. There was no roadmap within my head. There was no architecture within my head of what happens when you go from between sad and happy. I think a lot of people have a fairly straight line. For me, that line was very complicated. There was probably a couple rickety bridges in there. There might be the line might stop entirely in one place and start up again later. The architecture of my kind of emotional spectrum was all out of whack. And so what had happened early on was throwing in this idea of kind of oblivion as feeling really good, um, and as a just wonderful, accepting, comforting thing in place.
A relief
Really,
from the
just
sadness.
yeah, it just really scrambled everything. So as I got older, that things just got darker and worse. But then it wasn't until way later, through a lot of therapy and medication and stuff like that. I'm talking now like mid-20s, where I feel like I actually popped out of it, and realized the degree to which my whole spectrum was just way off. And I think
you've
I don't
spoken
even.
in some very visual terms about the sadness. You talked about lines, and you talked about color, and you've also talked about the taste of different musical sounds. And I'm sort of wondering, like, are you synesthetic? Do you see music?
Yeah. So that's also part of it. And that's not a that I think came into play. I mean, that's just almost like a footnote. That's just a lot of the stuff that
I was just curious
how I translate stuff.
For anyone listening who's not familiar with the phenomenon of synesthesia, there are certain people who see sounds, particularly music in terms of color and texture, and I've got it in a very mild sense. But it's interesting to me how many people who suffer from depression and anxiety have this heightened sensual, like weirdly almost boundary crossing sense of sensory input. So that's interesting to me. So you said
it also impacts numbers too. I remember it was highlighted by I commented on how how a phone number was pretty, and I think my mom was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, the 7's yellow and the 4 is red." And she's like, "Oh, okay, like we got to get this one checked out."
So you said you're the third of 4 brothers. Did any of your brothers sort of show any signs of
I
depression?
think so.
Or
I think everybody. So there's a whole bunch of other sidelines or concurrent timelines happening. So I think the brother immediately above me definitely did. And for him, I think it was much more of a direct hit to the chest. You know, he was depressed and he knew it. He was angry and he knew it. And that was really, really difficult for him. And he helped me a lot. You know, he passed me as I got older, different records. He saw that, I think he saw a lot of his own experience in me as I was going through different stuff. I think my oldest brother did as well. And he's much more of a technical mind. So I think it was much more complicated for him to deal with.
Are they okay now?
Yeah. But I think as we were kids, you know, when I say concurrent timelines, you know, like my dad was a pretty decent alcoholic, as was everybody else on his side of the family. So at a certain point, like my parents' marriage fell apart as a result of that. I was around maybe 12 in there. And so that was really complicated, and that had really set up a lot of kind of like bad wiring on all of us prior to that. For me, and this is a whole nother ball of wax, which would require like a whole different episode, not at the hands of my family or anything, but there's also some like fairly straightforward abuse dealt down to me directly, which I'm not going to go into in any great detail. But so there's all these different kind of like negative nutrients fed into all of us as we were growing up.
I think that's significant, though. Like,
totally, and that's why it's really weird to try to explain all of it. But it's all, for me, my life was just like the conclusive result of all of this stuff being mixed in.
So you've got this sort of like chemical depressive, anxious state, but it sounds like that this wasn't something that just happened out of nowhere. Like, how does your father's alcoholism manifest? I guess I should ask you: is your father still alive?
No, he drank himself to death. And
how old
but
was
I mean,
he when
oddly
that
enough,
happened?
that happened maybe like 4 years ago.
And
However,
did he ever have any brushes with sobriety where he tried to make amends?
No. This is a whole nother actual wonderful story. Every one of us, all 4 of my brothers, or all 3 of my brothers and myself, had a very profound interaction with him. They all took different forms, but everybody spoke to him and felt heard and loved kind of directly for the first time. not that he wasn't like walking in and like putting on a few rings and smacking us around or anything. It was
Right.
much more of a distance, and much more of a kind of like a boiling tone. Like for me, to throw something in the mix here that I think is funny. So when my parents split, let's say I'm like 12,
12. Yeah.
you know, all I want to do is play drums. However, when my dad gets home, it's kind of like flipping on the lights and cockroaches just sort of scatter. Everybody would sort of scatter. So for me, it was like, yeah, I'm not playing drums. Don't want the attention. Like he's back.
Right.
And again, not like he would walk in and kick in the door and like be horrible. It was just like dealing with him was tremendously confusing. And it was confusing in a way that I just didn't want to deal with. But so when he split, when my parents divorced and he moved out, I could play drums like for fucking ever. And my mom was, who, you know, is a total saint within this period of time. As long as I kept decent time, I could play till like midnight. She would go to bed with me playing drums downstairs.
How many hours a day are you playing at this point?
At this, as many as I could.
Right. So 3, 4 after school?
Yeah, maybe, probably more. And so now I'm like playing to records, which was probably, I think, playing along to like Abbey Road, playing along to, you know, just so many different records were some of the most.
Which records?
I mean, anything I can get my hands on.
Right.
I mean, stuff that comes back, you know, it's like a lot of classic stuff, like Smashing Pumpkins was huge. Like I was really obsessed with Jimmy Chamberlain, Screaming Trees. It was the 90s, so like the single soundtrack was pretty ripping.
I'm waiting for you to name one band that doesn't have an alcoholic dysfunctional member.
Yeah, good luck on that one.
Yeah, I mean, think about
a lot of stuff. But I figured out how to record myself on on this like old like stereo. So I had these old military headphones. I could throw on actual my dad's old records, or tapes, and then CDs, like anything that I could get my hands on.
So your dad moves out, he leaves his records.
I think timelines are all weird, but yeah, I think I totally that was also really cool. It was just being able to sort of flip through records. Not that he had some incredible collection, but it was just music.
But yeah, it was music.
And I was able to record myself. That was also a really big deal, because then I could sort of hear what I was doing, hear what I liked, hear that I would like grunt really loud when I played drums. I remember hearing and that being like, all right, gotta like not grunt, it's popping into the mic. So stuff like that.
Have you stopped that? You still grunt? I grunt.
Yeah, I think just not loud enough for it to be picked up. But especially when I'm doing really fast stuff, there's a lot of like type stuff going on.
I think that's just part of it. I mean, I get to the end of good shows and I'm all hoarse. It's not like I've been doing blow. Yeah. It's all scratchy voice.
Yeah.
So how is your school life at this point? So we're sort of at this point, we're in high school. We're looking at the void as it's beckoning to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great place, oddly enough. So school wise, yeah. So this is a funny little nugget. So the school I went to, I feel bad even mentioning the school by name, but so I went to public school through 5th grade. Middle school, the name's crucial to how funny it is. So I went to this school that is a religious, like Episcopalian religious school / Lord of the Rings school. The school itself is called Rivendell.
No way.
It still exists. That's hilarious. So the school is like,
so Northern Virginia.
Oh, dude, it's brutal. So
yeah,
this I remember being just so. So this is when, now that I'm kind of like attaching it to experience stuff, I was getting really significantly depressed and really, really angry because I just didn't know how to process anything. And so I'm at this school called Rivendell, where, like the stuff you read in class is like you're reading Lord of the Rings stuff and pulling like spiritual insight from it, and then also having Jesus shoved down your throat, which is like a huge problem for me because that was just like nauseating from the start. And then, so it's just insane. Like I remember being almost tossed. I think I was suspended because I got in an argument with the headmaster about like the that like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like they were claiming that certain art was of value because it was religious, and I was like, yeah, but like free will, right? I can decide what I find beautiful, right? There was like this big back and forth in front of the class, and I had like my parents got involved.
You got suspended over a question of aesthetics?
Yeah, basically.
You're
But
a fucking Socratic 15-year-old.
no, but it's like so that school was very weird. So then I went to another school, which is actually great for me for high school. So it was the school called the Field School in DC, which was just kind of a fancy art school that I think was really small. You had a lot of contact with teachers. The teachers were really approachable. The the headmistress was wonderful, and you had to. It was just a place where I couldn't get swallowed up in my own BS. Right. There was enough eyes that were just there was few enough kids and enough teachers to where I wasn't just totally anonymous in a wash of people. And right. I think that just helped me feel connected, far more connected than I would have at like a big school with like 2,000, 3,000 kids or something.
It seems to me like there's a possibility that at this point you're in a home with a single mom who is dealing with their own trauma of having been married to this at least emotionally at minimum abusive alcoholic, and you're one of 4 boys, so you're kind of lost at home, and you've come from this enormous school where your opinions were kind of inconvenient for the people who were in charge, and so now you've got adults taking an active interest in your well-being at the field school. So it sounds like a good situation.
Oh my God! So check this out. There's a good example. 2 examples I'll give to sell this. The school's This school still exists. It's very different now. It's much bigger, probably astronomically more expensive. But the woman who started it was there when I was there, and I remember I interviewed.
She was the headmistress you were just talking about.
She was the headmistress, yeah.
Okay.
And I remember I interviewed her in her office, and this is like cheesy and comical, but it was to me something that made me feel like this school could be a really great experience. She just handed me a marker. She's like, here's a marker. What is it? Go. And I just like ranted and raved about what you could do with the marker and, art and the elevation of the human soul and all, just normal crap that you can feed in that situation. But she loved it. And I felt totally connected to her. We had a good relationship. I would talk to her fairly regularly. And it was just, I was really, again, really, really lucky to be in that school, to have been, given that opportunity. Another point that I remember is I was in this one class, and at this point I'm like horribly just angry and depressed, like just all the normal stuff that kids are. But again, I guess been there for a long time. But I wrote this one paper and I got an F on it. And an F in my mind was like a statement.
It does actually stand for failure. So, yeah. Right.
And it was like, well, I didn't like trace my hand. I actually, was communicating something that I thought was important. And I thought that was ridiculous. And I, argued with the teacher and pleaded with the teacher. And I was like, all right, is it cool if I go get a second opinion on this paper? And the teacher, to his credit, was like, yeah, go for it.
So how old are you at this point?
At this point, I'm like 15.
Okay.
And I took it to the headmistress. And I was like, can you just read this? Tell me what you think. She read it. And she clearly knew why I had, approached her about it. And she just wrote in a giant marker, like A+. And she's like, give this back to your teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I see this thing happening with you that I'm recognizing it for the first time, I guess, that like those of us who came from dysfunctional homes often find an adult somewhere outside of our home and kind of get reparented. And it sounds like this headmistress really took off.
Definitely. And I think that was, I wouldn't put her in that exact role, but I think I was, and I still am, primed for that type of relationship. And oddly, even unconsciously seek it out at different times. And so at this time, I had also been, my mom, like things became more and more sort of destabilized as I got worse and worse and worse. And then my mom basically was like, something's horribly wrong with you. You need to, I want you to go talk to this therapist. So she put me in touch with this therapist.
So what manifestations was she acting on? Like, were you cutting yourself, or were you setting things on fire, or were you just sleeping all the time?
She was very thoroughly kept at arm's length by me, but it was, I think, just like sleeping all the time. I couldn't keep up the appearances of just being like a happy little kid, which I had been doing for a very long time. And so basically I just kind of like dropped the mask and was like, yeah, I'm miserable. Everything's miserable. Just, oddly enough, like drums are the only thing that makes me happy. So I was either like playing drums and then just going immediately to sleep, or just going immediately to sleep. And
I'm just going to interrupt to say, this is exactly my high school experience. So go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's the same for so many people. And that's why hopefully in some way somebody else might relate to this. But, and so then she was like, you just got to go talk to this guy. She's kind of like, the heavy lifting required to figure out what your deal is too much than I can handle. But she went to great lengths, and paid dearly to get me to go talk to this guy. And I think that really in the end was the thing that just really kind of just basically saved my life. So through that therapist.
So first therapy appointment, how old?
At this point, maybe like 8th grade.
14.
Yeah. Again, clearly my time is off, but I can slap it to a grade.
So you said that it probably saved your life. My early therapy experiences weren't super productive.
This for me,
maybe kept me alive by keeping me talking.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good way to put it. But for me, it was also the first time when, for me, all of the stuff that I'd been sorting out was all being articulated, reflected back to me through art. Mm-hmm. Music, had a mild interest in film and that kind of stuff. And then I had somebody basically being, not saying, what's your problem, but basically asking me to articulate what I was feeling, which was powerfully difficult. Still powerfully difficult, but it was something that, because I would just comically just deliver him like visuals.
Right.
They'd be like, oh, well, I feel kind of like this. And he's like, well, that's nothing. That's just you, again, for the millionth time, visually explaining your subjective experience. And he really held me accountable to really dig and to figure out what was going on. And he got me plugged in some meds. He brought in some meds, which was another huge deal.
How was your meds experience?
It was a long one, but it was, at the time, I just didn't have any reason not to. I didn't have any kind of like macho pretext of like, no, I'm not doing that. So it's
when I was
sure, whatever.
When I was a kid, it was considered not macho to wear a seatbelt.
Well, that's because that's still true in my book, but no, that's ridiculous. But
no, it was insane. Like the culture of self-care where I grew up was just rub some dirt on it and stop crying. So
yeah,
the fact that you were able to take meds is remarkable.
And without an issue. And I think that was, again, for me, just made all the difference in the world. And so that's what I was.
What meds?
I tried a bunch of different ones. The one I landed on that worked for a really long time was Effexor.
Mm-hmm.
But so to really to highlight this for anybody that might be questioning is like or listening in, that was such a huge step. And I would highly, if people are on the fence about it, it's just like, get over yourself, get on some meds, figure it out. It doesn't change who you are. It didn't change who I was. It just kind of gave me a couple milliseconds before I reacted. It just slowed me down a little bit as far as my thought processes, gave me a little bit more insight into what I was doing. Kind of like the way what I'm trying to say is give me like a millisecond extra to react. Like if an emotional Mack truck's coming at me, I was able to be like, okay, how do I actually feel about this, and then pivot out of the way.
I used nicotine for that. I was a heavy smoker from about 14 on until about, I don't know, 20 something.
Yeah.
And that was that's how I sort of coped with the immediacy, the looming jeopardy of huge feelings, was to just jam a cigarette in my mouth.
Yeah. And that makes total sense. And for me, and I probably should have done that early on. I mean, a whole nother thing we haven't talked about that was happening all this time, and I want to just, it was like panic attacks. So I'd have these really intense panic attacks where I would just literally just wake up, where my mind was going so fast that my body couldn't keep up. I remember waking up at one point and just being, it was as though, my brain was on fire. And I remember I had to get out of the room I was in. And I remember mentally, like, I couldn't speak because I couldn't move physically fast enough. I fell out of bed because I had attempted to stand up. I remember reaching for the doorknob and like mentally screaming at my hand to move faster because it felt like it took maybe a solid minute for my hand to reach the doorknob.
Is this the middle of the night or first thing in the morning?
This would be the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, at kind of whenever, really.
Were these sparked by dreams? Do you remember having dreams?
These initially would be, I would just wake up like that. Later on, they would be sparked by dreams.
Do you remember any of those dreams?
One I remember very vividly, and this is really weird. And the dream, literally, it was just basically a dream in which the entire footprint of my entire psychic footprint of my subjective experience of my entire life was communicated very clearly within like 15 seconds. I could walk you through the dream. That's a whole nother podcast. But what the reason I was saying, even brought that up, was there was all these things that for me were like slowly the wheels were starting to fall off.
Right.
And I just didn't have anything else to lose. And so the medication thing and the therapy thing gave me accountability. It was somebody I was, I would talk to. And when it got really bad, and it was just me just bluntly talking about blowing my brains out, it got to the point where he was like, all right, like, we're supposed to meet in 2 days. Can you promise me, look me in the eyes, and guarantee that you will walk in that door in 2 days? I'm not asking you to agree to anything beyond that. But just like, don't pull the trigger for 2 more days. And then the next time, like, don't pull the trigger till Monday. That kind of thing. And it was just
were there guns in the house?
No, but I could access them. I knew how to get my hands on some, and had like bluntly said so and thought it through. And
so that was your,
by anything really. That just seemed like pretty effective. But again, that's a testament to that is me. It kept me tied down in a good way. The medication and the therapy.
Yeah, the accountability is so crucial that someone's holding you to be here tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly, and that was just so essential. But then, and then that goes back to what you had highlighted a few minutes ago of like, this concept of like reparenting. Not that my mom did a horrible job. It was just she didn't have she didn't know what was going on.
She had her own trauma.
Yeah, she had her own stuff to sort out.
Yeah.
But this guy did, and was able to really help highlight a lot of my wiring and help just ask me, in a sense, I sum it up as just like, how's that working for you? When I would be like, oh, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then I want to do this, and I want to kill these people and whatever. And he's like, yeah, well, sounds like that all pretty much sucks, doesn't it? Right. And I'm like, well, yeah. So, and then he's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Just holding me accountable. And so that was, I was doing the therapy for like till my mid 20s, I think, maybe late 20s. And it wasn't until then, I think I like actually lived. I remember even thinking this. I was like 28 when I felt like I actually lived like a proper day. And I was like, oh yeah, like that worked. And that was a really weird experience. And I was like, man, I'm like almost 30. What the fuck? This is crazy. but it just took a lot of cleaning up how
Right.
I had, my wiring,
Right.
which, and now is still present. So that's what I was, I kind of boomeranged to feeling all this horrible stuff, thinking all this horrible stuff, um, being, profoundly impacted by that experience altogether. So then
The
as I,
experience of which experience?
uh, just like horrible, brute depression.
Right.
And so getting out of that in my mid 20s and kind of being like, oh, yeah, this is how to properly live your life. This is how to like bob and weave past really potentially damaging situations.
Events that emotionally derail you.
Yeah. And then clamp down so hard on never wanting to feel like that again that I kind of went in the opposite direction. So you can then be like, yeah, I'm not going to let anything bother me.
Right.
And then you stack some years onto that. You stack some weight onto that clamp, and you're like, nothing's bothered me in a few years. What's that all about? And then it's like, I haven't really felt anything in a while. And then you go,
Right.
like, so now a lot of my life now is trying to figure out, still dealing with that wiring and still figuring out how to be like, oh man, this or that thing is emotionally painful or wonderful, and it's being able to feel that and being able to navigate that in a healthy way, which I'm still dealing with.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
I get
go ahead.
I just, it's that thing where you distrust any strong emotion to the point where you just don't allow yourself to feel anything.
Exactly.
The anhedonia, that sort of chemical thing where you're inability to experience pleasure. I think it has a psychological aspect too, not just chemical, that you can get to a point where you're just like, I'm not happy, I'm not sad, but at least I'm not trying to kill myself.
Exactly. And that for me was like a great place to be. But what's funny, and this is like what I still see in myself all the time, and this goes back to the kind of messy wiring that was put in place early on. So when stuff does hit me hard, and totally innocuous stuff that just really shouldn't bring you to this point. For me, growing up, it was always like death was a comforting thing. That was where it was like almost like I experienced compassion for myself through turning to that, because it was just such a comfortable place to mentally be. So now, like, I get a like parking ticket. That's my response, oddly enough. It's like, oh man, this thing sucks. But if I was dead, it wouldn't suck. And that's a really weird, I see it in myself all the time. So like,
I think,
it's like, you're out of queso. Well, if I'm dead, then that doesn't matter. And it's like, that's just my brain, just like, well, here it is. Like, this is what you want to feel good, right? Here you go.
Right.
And every time I have to be like, nah, I'm like, I'll pass on the death for now. Like, it's just queso. But
it's so like, dark, but
yeah,
I get it.
But it's hilarious. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So were there? You haven't mentioned any substances. Like, you're the son of an alcoholic. You're dealing with this terrible anxiety and depression, and you're sort of like trying to deal with it through therapy. Did you at any point turn to drugs and alcohol yourself? I mean, that wouldn't have been an unusual pattern to fall into.
But I had seen it in him growing up, and was like, nope, like that. I didn't like it. It taught me in a sense like how not to be, and so it's just like, no, I'm not doing that. And it wasn't any like straight edge thing. It was just like, don't want to do it. For some reason, I think I was also like enough of a control freak, and kind of panicked enough that I was horrified of what might happen if I did run with that.
Right.
And then I also just, seeing a lot of friends that I grew up with, were, drinking at an early age. It just didn't look fun. It was like, it was annoying to deal with them, and I didn't want to be a burden on anybody like that. And so, yeah, that was just never an issue. I think the addictive personality really expressed itself later with food. Like, food is, it's like if one cheeseburger is good, then like 100 is better. And that now, like today, applies to coffee. It applies to everything. And so then it's a lot less damaging in one sense, but that's how the addictive personality really is present in my life.
Right. So, for me, I've several times said this, and sometimes people identify with it, but for me, you can sort of sum up the addictive personality by just saying, look, man, feelings are hard, and we all have different ways of not addressing our feelings or sublimating them. And it's, through 11 tacos or
or pastries and coffee.
Right. Or snorting heroin or whatever your thing is, but
like I went to the perfect example of that. I went into a coffee shop that a friend of mine was the manager of. I go in, and it's like, what do you want? And I was like, oh, today's been brutal. Like, give me one of those pastries. I want that scone. Hit me with that cookie, that other cookie too, and a large black coffee. And then he just like laughed in my face. It was like, yeah, I eat emotionally sometimes too. And no one had ever called me out on it. And I was like, oh my God, like he's so exactly right. Like I've become a monster. Like I have to get this in check.
I don't know, man. I mean, you're not exactly Tony Montana face down in a mountain of cocaine just because you've
no, exactly.
You've got a couple of pastries. That
sounds so much fun. I would happily be face down in a pile of pastries and black coffee. And what a good way to go. But but that's how
you seem to have a grip on it. I mean, we've spent a lot of time around each other, and you don't seem to be obsessively eating. So are you still doing meds?
No. So I stopped doing meds and I stopped doing therapy like mid-20s, whenever. Yeah, like it kind of around the same. I think I'd stopped doing meds earlier on in my 20s, and then around mid-20s stopped doing the therapy. It had just gotten it had gotten expensive. I felt much more comfortable kind of in my own head, and then there was some different dialogue about the money with the therapist, and eventually I was like, you know what, like maybe let's just see what happens if I just step out and kind of do my thing, and that was that.
I think sometimes for a lot of you kind of get to a point at some point in your life where you're doing enough just basic self-care that it's not as important. You're no longer dealing with like a 4-alarm fire or anything.
Totally.
But talk to me a little bit about how you sort of take care of managing intrusive thoughts and bad moods and anxiety now.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump on that for again, kind of as like delivering goods to anybody that might need it on this whole thing. Like for me throughout, so adding it up, I think it was, like from when it got really bad, I'd say like however old you are in like 4th or 5th grade through say like 25, 26. The thing that made it, that was fulfilling then and is still fulfilling now and still important, and that I would recommend to anybody, is just if you have any kind of creative bone in your body, to just run with it. And if that's like, you can, just anything. For me, it was drums. For me, it became film. It became, I'm not a good painter, but I could really appreciate painting. I think it as I got older, reading, all these different things where you can just experience the world, experience other people, see things, see yourself in all these other parts of the world and all these other creative outlets. That is what really helped pull me through so much of it. And I think that's a huge part of self-care now, for me.
Mm-hmm. I think the hazard with creative work, though, is that there's this push to be validated through commercial success. And if you don't become commercially successful, for a lot of people, that becomes its own anxiety and depression trigger.
Yeah. Yes. That's a whole nother dialogue. I'm really talking about base level. It's like, if you can just like kick a dent in someone's car so beautifully that it makes you cry, like, and that's your art, do it. I don't care what it is, just do it. And I think it's that kind of thing that just makes it, through listening to different records, through having just blissful moments at the kit, through a sentence in this book, a moment in that movie, those things can add actual time to your life if you're in a really bad place.
Yeah.
It's like it might literally just get you through to the next morning, without putting a gun in your mouth. And I think that's the true benefit of all that stuff. And then as you get a little further out from under the burden of that stuff, it's really just life affirming and a wonderful thing if you have access to that. The other thing, and right now I'm just really talking about when you're really in it, is people. And if there's just anybody in your life you can talk to, anybody in your life that can keep you accountable to just showing up, because I think time is the thing that'll just keep you alive. Like eventually you can only be like horribly depressed and suicidal for so long. But if someone's like, yep, just be around tomorrow. Hey, be around tomorrow. A week later, hey, be around next week. Yeah. And it might be that for 10 years. But if you can get that, which I was fortunate enough to have, then that can make all the difference in the world.
So talk to me a little bit about, so like, as we discussed this sort of like validation through creative work, like you're not clearly an Evan Cease Red anymore. So what was that progression like? You had more bands, of course, after, but when did you get in what bands and what were those relationships like, and how did that kind of keep you going?
Like I really I was plugged in. Again, for me, it's almost all social. I think that changes the ingredients that are in your life. I did a bunch of music with people here in Arlington. Evan Cease Red. I was in this band, the Triffids, and then through my brother, who passed me a lot of great records and stuff. He actually recommended me for this grind band being started. So there's a famous grind band here called Enemy Soil, which had split up. And then he basically just said to the guy that was starting the new post Enemy Soil band, like, hey, you should talk to my little brother. Like, he can play fast and do whatever you need. And so then I got plugged in through this guy, Rich Johnson, to this whole other group of people in a different part of the area that was then, they were all older. So at the time I was like 15. They're like 27. But so then through talking to them, I had access to, like, oh, you should read this book. Oh, hey, check out this record. Oh, yeah, this is this style of music. Like, why don't you try playing this? Like, for example, Rich, I think right when I first started playing with him, there was like a solid year.
What was that band called? It
was called The Index.
Okay.
And they just really worked with me, took me under their wing, and treated me like an equal, spoke to me like an adult. And I owe such a huge debt to them for just being a huge world to enter.
I can't kill myself. I have band practice on Tuesday, that kind of thing.
Kinda, yeah. I think at the time that it wasn't it was more like I get to play drums on Tuesday. Like, I don't care what my band is with, but and so that was so it was like Evan Cease Red, the Triffids, the Index. I did this thing, kind of like a weird noise project for a long time, that started a little after that, called, I mean, it's silly, Jesus of Nazareth, but it was all kind of like a power electronics type thing with live drums. It's kind of like if Ministry just had a guy playing really fast on it.
That sounds great.
It was fun. And for me, that also, through those guys that I just mentioned, I was able to like put stuff out on actual labels really early on. And it was a record, stuff I had put together myself entirely, that I was, emailing some dude in Germany who like put it out on a legit label, sent me stuff back, put another full length out with a guy in Japan. And it was like, I felt like I had done something. I had connected with some other part of the world that wasn't just somebody here that knew me as a guy that for whatever reason liked or disliked. It was like I had created something valid.
Yeah. Well,
and so
clearly
through these guys, then it was also like, oh yeah, we put out a 7-inch, we put out a full length, just started putting out records and stuff. And then it was, going on tour like that. That was my first tour with those guys. I was like, that was hilarious because I was like 15 or 16. And again, my mom was cool enough to be like, all right, well, you can go on this tour for 2 weeks, but like, I'm your legal guardian. Like, what if you break your leg and there's some kind of like medical thing that has to get addressed? So I was comically enough like signed over legally to one of the guys in the band as my legal guardian for like the chunk of time while I was on tour, and then they like signed me back over to my mom.
That's amazing.
So yeah, it was awesome. So like through again, and that's a testament to them. It's a testament to my mom. It's a testament to how fortunate I was to have these great people around me. And then, got to go do all this really cool stuff. And so by that point, it wasn't like, oh, playing in bands is like this cool thing I want to try. It was just kind of like, that was just this thing that I do, whether I like it or not.
I mean, it sounds like before you were even like legally old enough to be in bars, you had already established playing music as the kind of habit that would sustain you.
Yeah, exactly. And it was, and it did. And so that just became like my MO and still is. And I think for me, if you add it all up, and this is why I'm so hell bent on the creative outlet in whatever form it takes, that the drums for me at this point have been the most long lasting, life affirming, fulfilling and supportive and caring relationship I've ever had. Period, full stop. And
so you've never had a period of time where you put it down?
No, there's times when I wanted to, but it was the kind of thing where like I remember just like I think we were talking about this a little bit ago, just like sitting in front of my kit, just like weeping that I couldn't do something right, or like I was just so miserable or whatever it was, but I could never stop. I could hate the drums for not being what I wanted them to be, or not letting me be what I wanted to be. I could like resent them, but I could never leave them. And that wasn't even in the cards.
Yeah. Do you practice outside of band practice? Do you have a like personal?
No, I would love to, but like I can count on one hand the amount of times I've played by myself in the last 10 or 15 years.
So if you don't go to band practice, do you start getting kind of itchy brained and restless?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting.
But it's a huge.
You should get a practice pad, man. Just a practice pad and metronome. You'd be amazed what it does.
Yeah, I actually have one. And what's funny is I'm looking at a to-do list, and on it is it says rudiments.
Let's talk about to-do lists. That's a big coping strategy for me. So it sounds like you make to-do lists.
Yeah, for sure.
Every day?
Not every day. I'm starting to do it every day. I think I should be doing it every day.
So do you have a daily to-do list, and then anything beyond that?
Yeah, there's a daily to-do list. There's sort of sub-to-do lists that apply to work or kind of important life stuff beyond. It's kind of like I think it was like Eisenhower had some method, where you create a to-do list of a master to-do list that's consisting of a couple smaller to-do lists that vary in their severity.
Eisenhower, the president.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, I'm pulling that name out of. I think it's him, but it's like a weird like tactical to-do list for like maximum efficiency. But for me, I can't put it all on one list because that's ugly. I need to divide it into smaller lists, and then it's like a nice dapper, power-packed group list.
Yeah, I'm not so worried about maximum efficiency. I'm just worried about not standing in the living room on a Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and spinning my wheels till I get an anxiety attack because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing.
That's why the to-do list is important to me.
Yeah, totally.
So do you have like any self-care things about like watching how much sugar you eat, or like overdoing caffeine, or are you sort of careening through? It sounds like you still sort of got a little bit of a fraught relationship with like putting things in your mouth.
Yeah, it's the big answer is no. There's a general kind of like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do this, but like I can take this bullet. Why not? I'll go for it. Like I love German chocolate cake. It all matters. Kind of oddly enough, the thing that will make me change my behavior is how it affects drums.
Right.
If I can't physically communicate and say what I want to say through it, kind of in that context, because I've I don't have the heart rate. I don't have the lung capacity. I don't have the, I'm just like too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I will change things. Other than that, it's kind of a general loose, like, hey, try not to do that. That's generally regarded as unhealthy.
Are your
um,
are drums your only like physical workout? Do you do any kind of
I
workout?
would run. I used to run a lot. I don't now. I'd like to. My legs kind of messed up. Pretty much, yeah. I go through spurts, so it's like, oh, I'll do yoga for a little bit, then that'll be replaced by like a few pastries, and then I'll do like a kettlebell thing for a while in the
Yeah.
morning, and then like that slowly morphs into, I don't know, whatever else. You get distracted one day, then you're like, oh, I didn't do it yesterday, like why not, like screw it for today too, I'll start next week, and then it's like I'll start next month, and
Right.
then just basic stuff. But no, I don't have like a routine. I don't have I should, and that's one of the things I'm working
So
on, trying to
let's
bring in more and more.
one of the things I'm working on is not saying what I should do, but I
That's good.
want to. I
Yeah.
want to. I want to be more this, or I want to do this more often. But you're
Yeah.
still pretty good. I mean, I've seen you play drums. You're a really physical drummer. So it's not like you're sort of shoving German chocolate cake in your face and sitting on the couch. Like you're breaking a hard sweat when you play.
Yeah, and that's why I like it, and that's why I love playing really fast. That's why it's all. And interestingly enough, back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier, it's all an emotional thing.
All right.
Um, like that for me was such a big way to just like get stuff out of my system. That's why playing at like just full force, full speed was so. Uh, it was a great way to kind of relieve the burden, just because it was such a full body consuming experience.
Right.
And that also physically just helped really bring, um, it just gave me a lot of headroom as far as what I could physically do. So I'm in a lower gear when I shift down to do like multicult.
Hmm.
But because I can kind of keep pace at a higher gear, that really helps a lot on the multicult front stuff, because it's physical, but I can be a little more controlled and a little more deliberate about it.
Right.
Um, and that's what I like about playing the drums, and with that band specifically, is because it's very physical, but it's very rigid, and it's a communication of just tension really throughout the whole thing, which I really like.
My sort of rule about playing is to practice at the absolute top edge of your ability, and then play at about 75%, so that you're hitting things with full confidence and the full ability to execute, and you're not overplaying. But I always
Yeah,
explain to my bands, like, you practice, like, I'm going to play a lot, and you'll never see this live, but you're going to hear a lot of crazy 30-second note fills and a lot of stuff, just so I can establish a baseline of like a top edge of what I'm capable of. And then when we go out and play in front of people, I'm not going to embarrass you.
yeah, exactly, and yeah, you got to get the evil out uh, in the practice space, and then
Yeah.
yeah, there's no room for that on stage. But I think
It depends on the
that's
band.
it's fun.
But yeah,
It,
the
it,
bands I like, we're not, it's not John Patitucci or any of that crazy stuff.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. But for me, like as far as like playing and for lack of a better term, like extreme music and playing in grind bands and stuff, it's like there's just a flurry of ridiculous, even if it's just like tom snare, like Mick Harris, Napalm Death style fills, like that's profoundly rewarding as the drummer. Whether anybody likes
Yes.
it in that context, I don't really care,
Nah, I
because
dig
it's all
it.
just, yeah, that's part of how you speak that language. Whereas
Right.
that would be horrible for multicult or anything
Right.
else.
It's right. It's appropriate in context.
Yeah.
How much sleep do you get?
A lot. Well, I survived for a really long time on not very much.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that was fine. Recently, my job situation has kind of shifted, so I've been getting more sleep. Um, and I think that's just a longevity thing I'm trying to bring into play too.
Mhm.
Um, and that's I don't know why silent mode on my phone's not working. I apologize for that. But
Uh, that's no big deal.
and the so yeah, health wise, I'm trying to get that in more and more. Mental health wise, I'm also trying to get that in more and more.
I
But
think it's
in
important.
general, I get like, maybe I think I get a good like 7 to 8, and then sometimes more than that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm very deliberate about. I'm trying to uh, get up earlier. I get really down on myself immediately if I sleep past a certain time. If I'm not up and functional by a certain time, That goes
You-
back to a lot of like self-worth stuff
right.
um,
I was going to
from
ask,
way early on.
do you think that that is a sort of trigger for emotional um, patterns you had when you were sleeping all the time as a teenager and depressed?
No, I think it's connected in a self-worth sense. For me, I think it's I know, dude, I'll give you a very comical experience that just lays it out beautifully. But I know it has to do with action-based self-worth. Period. It's like if I'm not up and I'm not doing something and I'm not delivering value to or proving that I'm not a piece of garbage, then it's just downhill fast.
So, is there any chance that your father was military?
He funny you ask. He told
Yeah.
us he was military, but he wasn't.
What?
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Yeah, for the
Wait
longest
a
time I
minute.
thought I grew up thinking he was in the military, but he wasn't.
What was he doing?
I think he did like ROTC training for like a semester in
Well, I
college.
mean, as I've always said, like the valor stealing guys, the sort of pretend military guys are the fucking worst, man.
He wasn't. It's weird. I don't even know how to articulate it. It wasn't like he would walk around and it was like he would talk about all these experiences
Uh-huh.
that were military. And I think those experiences were misrepresentations of his time in ROTC training.
I think that it's one of the sort of failures of American culture, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because
Yeah.
this isn't a political podcast, but we, as a culture, Americans really venerate military service and cops, and they really kind of devalue other expressions of masculinity. So, like for my dad, who is a great guy, he's a retired Air Force colonel, and that whole like up at the crack of dawn thing,
Yeah.
and the highest form of expression of selflessness is to die in battle for your buddies.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a whole nother that's a whole nother complicated podcast. But I think you're
right.
right.
Yeah. But so for
And
me, like if I sleep too much, which I don't ever do anymore because I have a kid, I sort of get into this like it feels degenerate to sleep too long. And I
yeah,
think that's really unhealthy because like, you need to get more than 4.5, 5 hours of sleep a night.
yeah. For me, it's really I see now where you're going on the military thing. No,
Mhm.
it's literally just like it's totally self-imposed. It hasn't been modeled anywhere, I don't think. My older brother, I had to talk about it briefly with him. He had some theories on it, but for me, it really is like there's such a thin veil between me feeling good and feeling bad about
Yeah.
kind of what I'm doing, and part of it is just getting up and feeling as though I'm kind of like poised for action and poised to deliver whatever might need to be delivered. Not
Yeah.
being ready on that front just immediately sends me to a dark place. And I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll keep this
Hmm.
short.
Okay.
Um, Recently I shifted jobs. So for the next kind of chunk of time, next few months, I'm working a lot less. So I have a lot more time on my hands, which is great. Early on in this window of time, there was one day where I slept late. I slept till like, 9:30 or something. Got up and was like, yeah, I'll just sit around and watch a movie. And I love Charlie Chaplin, so I threw on a Charlie Chaplin movie and was like eating some cereal, watching Charlie Chaplin till like 11. And immediately was like, oh man, like what a pile of shit. It's 11 o'clock and like haven't even taken a shower yet. This is terrible. Immediately really depressed. Have to correct this in some way. I'll go down. There's this exhibit, a great part of DC is you have access to these great museums.
Right.
There's just one exhibit I wanted to go see.
What was it?
Um, it had some Monet stuff. And so I was
Cool.
like, all right, I'm gonna go check that out. But I was like, I can't bring myself to take the metro down there. I don't want to deal with the train. I'll just get in the car because, like, if I see a spot, I'll park, and if I don't, fuck it, I'm coming right back, and like the day's just dead. I go down there, find this great spot, um, like right in front of the National Gallery. I park, and I'm like, well, I got to eat something. I need to get a cup of coffee before I go in there. I walk up the street. You have access to all this great stuff in DC. Stick my head in a variety of doors. I'm like, oh, this restaurant's too fancy. Like they can't have my like garbage ass in here. And it's like, oh, this restaurant's got like the seating's weird. I'm by myself. It's gonna be uncomfortable. Just ruining every opportunity for enjoying myself. And I'm supposed to be enjoying myself. I've got free time. I'm going to a museum. I live in a city. I've got enough money to go buy coffee. Doing whatever.
Yeah, but it sounds
hating
like
every second of it.
You've grabbed yourself by the scruff of the neck.
Totally, and just threw myself out. It was like, get out there, you just worthless piece of garbage,
you slob. Yeah. Oh,
and so
God.
then I get out there, I get my food, I eat it in a park. It sucks. The food objectively was total shit, but I picked it deliberately. I was like, well, this sucks, which means it's good enough for me. And I had some terrible cup of coffee. I go down to, I march myself through the exhibit. I'm barely taking in everything I'm seeing. Profound, priceless art everywhere, just bouncing off the front of my head. At this point, I'm like, oh shit, the road's about to switch. I got to go get my car off the street. So, because you can only park for a certain amount of time. So I get back in the car, head home, and then I'm just out of sorts for the rest of the day.
I mean, you could tell yourself all day long, I was in the wrong head this entire day, and I ruined it for myself. But it's also important to know that, that's just a thing that's going to happen sometimes if you allow yourself. Now no
the
Charlie
key is
Chaplain
if you
before
allow
noon.
yourself. I had not allowed myself, A, to do that, B, to feel that way in a really long time. So it was a really foreign, weird experience, and it completely kicked me in the side of the head. Because I was feeling, period. I was feeling something that was negative for a long time. First time I had done that in a long time. It was complicated, and it was immediately kind of self-worth based, which was, as we've discussed, very complicated.
Right.
And what made it worse is I was doing stuff I wanted to do. It was like I was eating, I was drinking coffee, I was looking at great art, and hating all of it, which is so weird. But so then I realized at the end of the day, I was like, well, that was terrible. What a waste of a day. What a waste of my time. Rematch. Next time I have this type of time on my hands, I need to redo this exact day and make it work. And I did.
To me, yeah, it's important for you, like me. Oops, I just bumped my mic. Important for you, like me, to kind of know what your triggers are.
Yeah. And so what I realized in that moment, to run with that statement, is I just slept in too late. If I get up early enough, if I get up, take a shower, put on some clothes, and even just the simple act of stepping out onto my porch, then I've, in a sense, broken a seal. I've crossed this unseen meridian line / the actual barrier to my home. And I'm officially part of the world. I'm officially functional.
I love
that little
That's
trick
fantastic.
changes the rest of the day.
That's fantastic.
So a week later, got up a little earlier, got on the metro, deliberately hopped off the metro. So I had to walk across town. DC is a beautiful city. So I got to walk through all this, beautiful city, got a cup of coffee, sat down with the New York Times book review, which was writing a review of a book I had just finished. So I was very eager to get their take on it. I was able to sit and enjoy being totally pissed at how they misrepresented the book. And then walked my way down to the museum, saw every exhibit, took my sweet time because I didn't drive, because I had the wherewithal to get on the metro 2 stops, which is ridiculous.
Right.
And just had a great day. Had lunch by myself at a great barbecue joint. Just did my thing, and it all worked just because I got up early enough not to feel like a pile of garbage.
My sweet wife caught me once reading something that enraged me. And she said, "Why are you even reading that website? You know it makes you angry." And I said, "Babe, otherwise I can't hate it in detail."
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I totally support that.
Yeah.
So
that's that. Yeah. So we're gonna just to wind it up here. I kind of want to make this a regular thing on the podcast, and most folks are familiar with the Bernard Pivot questionnaire, whether they know it or not, because it's the thing that James Lipton uses to end the the Inside the Actor Studio. It's
Yeah,
10,
yeah,
10
yeah.
questions, and they're very revealing. But I kind of have my own thoughts about that. And while I enjoy those, I feel like everybody's sort of walking around with some preconceived notions about how they'd answer those questions. So I've come up
Mm,
with a few of my own, if you'll
okay.
indulge me.
Yeah. Do
Um,
you need like immediate like ink blot answers or
yes. Oh yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah. It's only 7 questions. It might expand to 10. It might contract to 5. I don't know. But
Okay.
so here we go. The crash and ride. 7 questions.
Yeah.
First, what's your favorite meal you've ever had?
Favorite meal I've ever had. To I could think about that. I've been able to travel a lot for work.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a lot of great food. The first thing that came to mind, oddly enough, is a burger I had in Singapore, which was so the whole meal was really simple. It was a burger stuffed with brie and mint, on some
That
kind of
sounds
fancy
amazing.
bun with duck fat fries, fried spam fries, and homemade root beer. Not the most elegant of meals, but you said what's the best meal? That popped up. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's the best meal, but that was a damn good meal.
I don't rate meals based on how many forks there were on the table when I sat down. So,
Yeah,
um,
it was just the experience. I had been able to kind of run to that spot due to work. I knew the owner and the chef, which helped out a lot.
right.
So yeah, it was just that was a great meal.
And that was for me. A lot of times when I think about this question, it has a lot to do with circumstances too. Was it about being in Singapore as much as, or was it really just a really elementally, fundamentally satisfying meal?
It was a genuinely powerful meal. It was also about again circumstances. I had had the day to. I mean, this is again. I've been saying I've been very fortunate this whole time. This is a great highlight of that. I had
Hmm.
had the day to run amok by myself in Singapore, and check out a handful of like great museums. Was able to spend some time with some other people I'd worked with, that took me around town, and then ran over at the end of the day to this. So I was also really hungry, to this wonderful restaurant and had that, was treated like a champion, um, due to some work relationships, and then had this great meal. So it was kind of circumstantially, it was great. But the food was just really something else.
Cool. All right. Next question.
Mhm.
What's the most frightened you've ever been?
The most frightened I've ever been. Um, Oddly enough, what comes up is kind of like remember that dream I referenced?
Yes.
That was
You didn't tell me what the dream was, though.
yeah, it would be profoundly difficult. If I explained it to you, it wouldn't make any sense. But every detail has a lot of resonance. It was the experience of uh, coming out of that dream, a total panic. Uh, I would,
Can you give
yeah.
Can you give me just a little taste of what the dream was?
God, okay, yeah,
I'm
I'll
so
get this.
curious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there was okay, I'll give you one part of it. I was watching this I was standing in a window watching this massive dog, and I'm talking a dog like the size of a horse, that was tremendously shaggy and and just like an incredibly shaggy dog the size of a horse. And he was dancing around this other being, playing with this, I guess it was basically a kid. And there was this dog was emanating fear. Just this dog was primeval in all things that are evil in the world. Um, and the dog knew that I was watching, and the kid was totally oblivious to it and was playing with the dog, and the dog was being a good dog to that kid. And I knew it. And the kid was having fun with the dog. This was just like the opening scene of the dream, which then went on to all the stuff.
I
But it
mean,
was
you knew the
way
dog was dangerous.
yes, and the dog knew that I was watching, and the dog knew that I knew that it was primeval. It's not just dangerous. It was like every horrible thing in the universe, from like nuclear war to whatever, to like parking tickets, was in that dog. So long story short, I came out of that dream full panic mode, and I couldn't
You were
move, and
you were powerless in the dream.
Yeah, I was powerless in the dream, and then powerless in real life. When I woke up, I couldn't move. I was in this really hyper stimulated state mentally. Um, tried to get out of the room. Couldn't physically do it because I couldn't. I had like fallen on the floor. Couldn't reach the doorknob. Like just ridiculous.
This was when you were a teenager, right?
This was when I was like 24 or something.
Oh wow.
And maybe even later. But so it was panic attacks. Long story short, panic attacks. That's the most afraid I've ever been. Because it's abstract fear.
Right.
So
All
it's
right.
like everything's terrifying. Go ahead.
That sounds brutal. Let's go to the next question. Question 3. What is the thing that you've lost that you miss the most?
Oh man. Jesus Christ. I want to say, this is sounding awful. I want to say spontaneity.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, you talked earlier about that feeling of avoiding strong emotion and kind of wanting to control situations because otherwise you might be unpleasantly hit by unexpected.
Yeah.
So that spontaneity would fall exactly into that.
Yeah.
When I ask people that question, sometimes they say, "Do you mean like a physical thing or a metaphorical thing or a?"
Yeah.
And,
it's a really good question.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Yeah, that's totally up to you.
All right. What's your favorite place in the world to play music?
To me, playing music going on tour in Europe is like the most fun thing in the world.
Is there a particular city in Europe that you're most fond?
No, because it's just being so far out of, it's just a different context in general.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the playing on weird gear, talking to different people, talking to people that fundamentally have a different perspective than you, talking to, it's just the culture of music's different. I haven't played anywhere in like the Far East or anything. But playing outside of my comfort zone, anywhere that's not familiar is
interesting.
My favorite place to play.
The culture of music thing is important. And
totally.
I never really thought of it in those terms, but touring in Europe with bands, I've come to cities where we're playing at the cultural center, not some bar. It's alcohol that's served, but so is coffee, and so is tapas or whatever. And the whole town comes. It's not like a commodified consumer, just like thing that you do as a fashion accessory. And there's bands that I like more because I feel like they kind of dovetail with my manifestation and my worldview as much as they do with like being a great band. I mean, God, you're into punk rock. You know what that feeling's like. There's some bands I'm like, I like this because it's kind of me, whether it's good or not. But you don't have that in these towns. There'll be kids and old people and come to see the music, and it's different.
And it's all those satellite experiences with that. It's like struggling to get, food the next morning when you just run out by yourself. It's the like weird old guy you befriend at the end of the night, and you can't speak the same language, but you both know that Metallica is great. I'm actually citing a real example in the Czech Republic one night, but it's like,
that's great.
It's the guy was literally like, "We don't speak English." I was like, "I don't speak Czech," and then he's like, "But we speak Metallica," and then he just like started playing. And it's that kind of thing. Like that was just a great experience. And it was outside of my comfort zone, and it was wonderful. So for me, like playing music abroad is so tremendously fun.
So following on that question, if you could live anywhere in the world, visa considerations, income considerations, all that aside, where would you live?
Somewhere where I could live in a totally isolated situation and then access a historic city with some decent effort. So I'd say,
I mean, I have a suggestion.
The hills of like Austria somewhere.
Yeah, or northern Spain. You can buy a whole city in northern Spain for like $250,000.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll take it.
It'll be abandoned, They were advertising this a couple of years ago on the internet. There's a real estate agent in northern Spain who's just like, if you can get 4 or 5 families, you can resettle this place because everyone moved to Barcelona 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, or like a small Cycladic island off in Greece. I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
And how do you
Black.
prepare it? Black.
Cold.
Cold.
Yeah.
Do you cold brew?
Yeah. And I love it.
So, I keep hearing about the cold brew slow extraction thing that cuts down on the amount of acid. Tell me about your ritual with that.
My ritual is always changing, and it's not a big thing as long as it's I like it real bitter. So I have actually found that the cold brew is good, but I also like a lot of the acidity. So I've done stuff at home with like a toddy, and then just a cold French press and whatever. And I'll even take just coffee on ice, even if it's not really highfalutin fancy coffee. Like in DC, on the East Coast, there's like so much great, ridiculously expensive, snooty coffee, which is delicious, but it doesn't have to be snooty for me to like it. But just cold, black, bitter coffee is a profoundly invigorating sensation. I love it.
So you're a dark roast guy?
I'm kind of an any roast guy.
Yeah.
I've always been like dark, and I've actually been dabbling more in lighter roast stuff. But again, it's like I am very easy to please on that front. So just black, really cold coffee, and I'm down.
Awesome. Well, man, this has been great.
That's it. Those are all the quick. Oh, all right.
You were bracing for like
braced for like 10.
Well, I want them to be perfect, and if I don't, I'm not going to just throw one out there until I'm sure about it. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, since we're winding up, about where people can find your music online.
All the usual stuff. There's Triac's got Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. The Ar-Kaics is the same. I play in Multicult as well, has that. I play in a band called Backslider, which is a Philly another kind of grindcore thing that's also online and on Facebook and I think probably Instagram.
What about Bandcamp? You guys give Bandcamp
all of this applies to Bandcamp for every band. I also do this other thing called Reeking Cross, which is another grind thing that's also on like Facebook and Bandcamp and whatnot.
Wow, man, you're a busy dude.
As far as my social, like I don't really use Facebook in a social sense, other than band stuff. So like I'm on Instagram as Bubba Bucyrus, spelled exactly how it sounds.
Bubba.
Yeah, and Bucyrus.
Okay. Also, I should note here, a Multicult is spelled exactly how it sounds, Multicult. Ar-Kaics is spelled Arkaics, and Triac is Triac. Those are all on Bandcamp, and there's a big social media presence for all of those. I follow you on Instagram, and I absolutely love the shots of the floor tom wandering the planet.
Yeah, just traveling gnome of.
I highly suggest. If you're a drummer or you're all interested in any of this, definitely follow Jake on Instagram. Man, thanks. This has been great. I don't know if I mentioned this is the first episode of the podcast. So
cool. Yeah. And I just want to kind of tip my hat to you. Hey, thanks for having me on here for sure. But also, man. I think really thanks to you for just throwing this on the table. I think this is, like I said, this is something I haven't talked about in ages. And I think a lot of people don't talk about it. And a lot of people feel like they shouldn't, or they can't, or for whatever reason. But I think, gradually culture shifting, mental health is becoming much more important, as it should be. I don't know, just having a dialogue. If one little statement resonates with somebody, that's a huge deal.
Man, it's like this. I think for a lot of us, like we hit a point in our lives where things start to get better, and man, we shut the fucking door. Like we try to get as far away from it as we can, as fast as we can.
Totally. And that's why I haven't, like, honestly, I haven't talked to, there's relationships that have developed into hugely important relationships after I really got out of a lot of that stuff, and it's just never come up.
Well, man, but I have I have younger friends, as a musician, people who I absolutely love, other drummers especially, and they're down in it. And I don't have there's no advice that I have to give except, well, you got to live through it. You got to be here tomorrow. And
time, yeah.
And man, that's the last thing you want to hear when every day is agony. So,
and that's why I again want to thank you for this, because I think the thing that if you had told me like you just need to meditate, get some sleep, and eat right, I would want to kill you 10 times more than I already did.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing is it just doesn't work. And so I think this kind of thing where somebody just might see something reflected in it, that works for them or they can relate to in some small way. That's really all that can be done. But I just think it's a great service.
Well, thanks, man. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me on here.
Man, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks again.
Of course.
Well, that's our interview with Jake Cregger. I want to thank him for coming on. He's such a good guy. Thanks for bearing your soul, Jake. In the meantime, if you're suffering from anxiety and depression and you're struggling to get through the day and you're wondering how you're going to go on, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Do me a favor, be here tomorrow.